So, at some point or another in your life, you've probably experienced something like this. There's a huge bag of potato chips in front of you, shining with all of their salty, oily goodness, and you grab a handful. Almost before you've even finished eating those chips, however, you're already thinking about the next handful and the next and the next. Why? Well, the interesting thing about potato chips here is that they're triggering a drug-like high in your brain. When you eat something pleasing, a lot of times something high in sugar, fat, or salt, your brain releases everyone's favorite neurotransmitter, dopamine. Dopamine gives you that happy feeling and tells your body that you're enjoying the food that you're eating. Now here's where the reward pathway comes in. Dopamine is great, and your brain knows that. So after a release that leaves you feeling good, your body craves more to get that same happy feeling. So you keep eating. This process is similar to that of somebody using drugs, and it explains why most people won't continue to eat something like spinach. Now, at a certain point, we'll start to feel sick, and that's the brain's way of telling us to stop. However, in some people, the addiction is much more powerful and resembles something of a drug addiction. This is a real mental illness called food addiction, and it can lead to some pretty serious health complications. This also explains why you start to eat when you get bored.
Remember that time your mom tried to feed you a hearty plate of Brussels sprouts and you felt like you were ready to throw up, while your brother practically devoured the whole thing? You probably wondered why two people in the same family could have such different tastes for the same food. Well, interestingly enough, scientists are often puzzled by this too. Many theories have been put forth. Some scientists say that children who experience foods frequently while in utero are more likely to develop a taste for it. Others say that in the first year of life, children will eat any foods without complaint and develop a taste for it in that way. One thing that is agreed upon, however, is that the continual exposure to foods will make a person more likely to enjoy it. So why are people much more willing to try a dessert they've never had than a vegetable? Historically, natural selection has made us prone to enjoy food rich in sugars, salts, fats, since they are necessary for survival. The only problem is that today, foods rich in these things are often unhealthy and contain unwanted things like additives and preservatives.
Considering 2/3 of America's population is overweight, shouldn't we know enough not to consume too much fatty food? Well, when your stomach is empty and your body is in need of some more nutrients, it releases a chemical called ghrelin. Ghrelin interacts with a neurotransmitter in the brain called NPY, which turns on the desire to eat, aka we get hungry. Once you eat, another chemical is released called a leptin, which inhibits NPY and makes us feel super full. But why is that fourth slice of cake so tempting, even if you're already full? Scientists believe that back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers before the agricultural revolution, foods that were rich in fat and sugar were hard to come by, so these foods became super desirable. So even though the availability of these foods is overwhelming, we still have a strong instinct to eat them. It has actually been proven that the continual eating of fatty, sugary foods actually overrides the ghrelin and leptin effect. Not only do unhealthy foods activate pleasure centers in our brain, but also the touch centers. So our brains respond to fatty, high-calorie foods the same way it responds to hugs from your mom. It's literally comfort food. But even though our brains are totally stoked about the highly accessible, unhealthy foods, our bodies are still in need of foods high in nutrients.
So you've definitely heard from your parents or from someone that it's important to eat a good balanced breakfast every day. But how necessary is that? Will eating a Pop-Tart really make it harder to concentrate? So essentially, eating lots of sugars and carbohydrates at once will give you a sugar high. This will make you feel alert, maybe even hyper, and sure, it will be easy to get into your seat by homeroom, but by the middle of R1, you'll probably start to feel tired, bored, or distracted. These feelings are a result of the quickly dropping dopamine and serotonin levels in your brain. The best way to avoid these crummy feelings is to eat something more healthy. For example, breakfast of eggs, fruit, toast, and orange juice, or anything high in proteins and vitamins will give you a slower and longer-lasting dopamine and serotonin release. This means that throughout the morning, your brain will release these neurotransmitters at a steady rate instead of all at once. This will help you feel alert and happy throughout the morning. This also explains why it is so important to eat breakfast every day. Eating no breakfast is almost as bad as eating a bad breakfast, since you will experience the same negative sensations, which makes you more likely to eat unhealthier foods later on. Because again, your brain is smart and it wants that dopamine high as soon as possible.